Hello everyone, it's great to see you all again. Before we start, let's pay respect to the Buddha. Please stand. Put your palms together. First bow. Second bow. Third bow. Please be seated. Thank you everyone for joining us today. Life is like a roller coaster. We have times when we think life is going great, but we also have times of despair. What can we do to overcome these obstacles? As Tzu volunteers, we are lucky enough to hear Master's teachings. And through Master's teachings, we can apply them in our everyday lives. Master Tzu puts the scripture's meanings into simple concepts that we can understand and thus apply them in our everyday lives. We can use Master's words to motivate ourselves through life's obstacles. Today, we are grateful to have two guest speakers share their Tzu journey with us. First, we have Brother Johan, who is currently in Hawaii. He is the husband of Grace in the Dai drama Amazing Grace, which was recently aired on Dai TV. Let's hear his story of how Tzu made changes for his direction in life.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's evening here in Hawaii. I hope you're all well. I'm so excited to share my story for you. So, some of you might have seen the drama that was broadcasted a month or so ago, Amazing Grace or 一如阳光. So this is what Grace and I look like in the drama. Obviously, in real life, we look a little bit different. So this is actually the same occasion, a wedding that we were part of. And yeah, so this is what we look like for real in real life during that wedding. This was back in 2008 when we had recently met. But before we get to this point, I'd like to share a little bit about myself. Those of you who might have seen the drama will know some part of my story, but the drama is obviously about Grace. It's not really about me. So it's only includes me for the time when I knew Grace, and it's from her perspective, not from my perspective. So I will share a little bit my story, including the kind of challenges and difficulties that I overcame, and most importantly, how my direction changed during this story. So I'm from Sweden, very far from Taiwan. Those of you who can point this out on the map, please point. You can type in the chat as well to communicate with me. That would be fun. So as you might guess, based on the position of this map, this is Sweden, and the end point of this little arrow here, or the pin here, points directly to the city where I was born. It's right on top of the big lake in Sweden. The city is called Karlstad. So there I grew up in a very kind of countryside, small city, small town place. We were known as the biking family. My father would always bike with 2 kids, at least 2 or 3 kids on the bike. Here you can see me in front, and the hairball that's on my father's shoulder is my little sister. This is a few years later when I'm on the right and my sister is the one next to me. I actually have a total of 6 siblings, so there were more to come afterwards together. So you have both my dad and my mom here as well. So Sweden is a little bit different from, I believe, most of the countries that you are from that are more tropical. So yeah, this was the kind of environment that I grew up in. I've always liked studying, so it was very natural for me to go on to do a PhD in physics. And I got my PhD in 2005. And this was my very cute PhD team that my professor in the middle, and then the postdocs and other PhD colleagues. I had a great time. I always enjoyed the search of knowledge. So I really enjoyed physics and learning about the fundamental constituents of matter. I studied philosophy on the side, classical Greek, just trying to get as much knowledge and understanding as I could. But one thing that I never really cared too much about, I cared a lot about nature. I was very involved in environmental protection, donated to Greenpeace and so on. But I was never much of a humanitarian during my younger years. So from Sweden, I went on to the US, to Stanford. And the first thing I did when I came to the US was to buy a motorcycle and use that as my main mode of transportation. So now I'd like to show a little video about the first time that I visited Grace. So a little interlude here. Please go ahead and show this video.
Hello?
Hi, is this Johan?
Yes, this is Johan.
I was wondering where you are now and if you're able to locate the house.
No, not yet. I'll be there in about 15 minutes.
Oh, okay, great. I'll see you then.
See you.
Coming!
Hi! Oh, hello!
I'm Grace. You're Johan?
Yes, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Welcome in.
Thanks for letting me stay here.
Oh, no problem.
Yeah, so that was actually fairly close to the way that it actually happened when the first time that we met. Let me try to switch here. Yeah. So I met Grace when I was at a kind of retreat in Southern California, in Santa Barbara. It's about 6 hours drive from Northern California and Bay Area, where Stanford is, down to Los Angeles area. So since I was very close to Los Angeles, I wanted to visit, and a friend told me about this friend of his who has a house and a guest room, and said that she would be fine to let me stay in her house. And she did let me stay in the house, and we really enjoyed each other's company. What I didn't know about Grace was her background as a Tzu Chi volunteer. So she was actually at Tzu Chi. She played the saxophone, played music during trips and fundraising. She had been on disaster relief. This, I think, is from Bolivia. She had started a choir that you'll hear about in a little bit. And she brought her co-workers from Ernst & Young to serve the homeless in Los Angeles. So she tried all ways that you could think of to bring in young people, so through the choir, for example, and also non-Chinese, the non-typical Tzu Chi people to come into Tzu Chi and to get to experience the kind of spirit that Tzu Chi has. At that point, I didn't know any of these. But actually, the first weekend when I stayed at Grace Place, I also met the choir. So I'd like to show another little clip here about something that happened the first time I met the choir. And this is also actually pretty close to what might have happened in real life.
I think that's all the notes I have today. Johan, what do you think?
Oh, you're not as strict as I thought. You're quite encouraging, actually, so I think you're a great conductor.
It meant the choir.
Oh, it sounded like angels singing. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you.
That's a compliment. We're all on track then, yeah?
Oh, maybe just one tiny suggestion. If you can draw out the ending a little bit and make it a little bit more mellow, I think it would sound even better.
Yeah, it's really interesting to kind of look back and get this opportunity to see what I might have, the kind of impression that I might have given back then, some 10, 12 years ago. It's just very interesting. So Grace brought me choir, and as we started to spend more time together and became officially a couple, I started volunteering more with her, mainly in the choir, at events where I would play or sing together with the other choir members, go to nursing homes, things like that. But I never really got too much into kind of the spirit or teachings of Tzu Chi. And I didn't really participate in any poverty relief or charity work with Tzu Chi. Actually, what we mainly did was we were having a lot of fun. We would eat together, we would travel, go on vacation, play music together. We went to Sweden where this photo, I really love this photo of Grace and me with my grandparents. We just had a really great time. And this went on for about a year when the first shock happened. Grace got salivary gland cancer. That was also the first time that after she got her diagnosis, we went to Taiwan for her surgery. I would like to show one little video clip too, just to give a little impression of what it might have been like coming to Taiwan the first time.
Welcome to our home in Taiwan.
Hi, Johan. Welcome to Taiwan. You're finally here. Great.
Amazing. Let me see. No, I know. I'm sorry, 你最关心我 but please, I'm okay. 哎，爸比，来，我介绍一下，这是 Johan. Johan, this is my dad.
您好。
Daddy.
Welcome.
Yeah, I mean, definitely there were some culture clashes happening now and then. But overall, I have to say, I'm extremely impressed with Grace's parents. Me coming with her to Taiwan, basically, this was the first time that her dad met me. We stayed for, I think, a month that first time, went back to the US, came back for a second surgery. And then we actually stayed with her parents for on and off for about a year and a half. So the way that they accepted me and welcomed me was something that, I mean, it's really amazing. Something else that was really amazing was the way that Grace approached her first cancer. So salivary gland cancer it's not extremely high mortality, but it's also not a very, it's definitely a risky cancer to have. It took a lot of effort, a lot of suffering. She went through a total of 4 surgeries over the course of about 1 year. And throughout the entire process, she was very, very optimistic and very kind of result oriented. So she would always make sure to get like the full picture from the doctors, wanted to know as much as possible about the illness and about what the chances were, about what the treatment meant, about everything that was going on. And she always had that smile on her face. This is right after she comes out of her second surgery. It was a pretty big surgery, cutting up this area here. And you can tell that she doesn't even have the strength to really give a real smile, but she still puts her both thumbs up right coming out of the surgery. That's the kind of spirit that she managed to have throughout this entire process of her salivary gland cancer. As we were staying in Taiwan in 2009, Typhoon Morakot happened on, it's called Baba Shuizai in Chinese, so it happened on August 8th. And obviously, Grace was still under recovery. She was actually going through radiation treatment at the time. So there was no way that she could go to do disaster relief. So she and her mom signed me up to go to help out in southern Taiwan, together with other volunteers from northern Taiwan who went down. And this was really a scene that was completely different from anything I had seen. The entire place was covered in like half a meter of mud, and you had water throughout the streets. And there was one house that we helped to clean where the water outside was higher than the water inside. So there was no way that we could just push the mud out of the house. Instead, we had the only way that people could think of was to use buckets like this and scoop the mud out through the window. And you can see the amount of mud on the floor. It goes about this high, and this is the entire house is covered in this much mud on the floor. And it's thick mud, it's heavy. And we have this little bucket right here to scoop this out through the window. I was thinking, this is ridiculous. There's just no point. We should go to some other house where we can actually clean it, because there's no way that we can finish this. We should just wait for some truck to come and like pump the water out, pump this mud out. But the other volunteers said, no, we can do this. And they started scooping. So we took turns scooping out water. As soon as one person got tired, the next continued. And within an hour and a half or 2 hours, we had emptied the entire house. From the entire place was completely free of mud. There was this thin layer of mud just covering the floor that she could easily, the elderly lady who was living in this place, that she could just clean up basically with a mop. That was a very educational experience for me. I mean, I had gathered so much knowledge through all my studies, my PhD and so on, but I could not imagine that a small group of people, we were maybe 10 volunteers, would be able to empty this entire house of mud in a matter of hours. That was beyond my comprehension. So that was really an awakening experience for me, the power of a team. The next big thing that happened was in 2010. On January 12th of 2010, Haiti was rattled by this very big earthquake. It was a terrible earthquake. It was big, 7.0, I believe. Not huge with, say, Japanese standards, but for Haiti, with the very poor infrastructure and with the epicenter being very close to the capital, Port-au-Prince, the entire capital was just razed to the ground. As you can see on the left-hand picture, there are only a few structures that are still standing. Everything else has just collapsed. So you could see these 7, 10-story houses where the floors were just lying like right on top of each other like a wafer on the ground. And you can only imagine what happened with people who were in these buildings when this earthquake hit. They have estimated that over 200,000 people passed away in this earthquake, meaning that every family in Haiti had every person in Haiti had some family member or close friend who passed away in this earthquake. It was a suffering that was beyond anything that I could possibly imagine. I'd like to play a little video taken and created by one of the other volunteers that was there at the same time as I went there in March of 2010.
Seigneur, c'est fausse moi, l'aime dans danger. L'aime tout espoir semblé, fini pour moi. Moi, relais au secours, Père céleste, des milliers d'anges campés à moi. Saint-Esprit, ou c'est diffé que chauffer dans moi. Les frissons, découragement, flopé dans moi. Père, courage pour brûler, Emmanuel, l'esprit fortifié dans mon moment. Si brûler, Emmanuel, il tourne moi. Les brûlés, ouais, Shaddai, baguette danger. Les brûlés, oh, cet esprit, tu fais descendre.
Haiti was really a turning point for me in my journey. Seeing that kind of suffering, I mean, all the people, the kind of spirit that people had after having lost everything they owned, their family members, their friends, seeing how skinny they were. These people, if they were lucky, they got to eat one meal per day, and they often had to go days without food. And then seeing the kind of spirit that the Tsuji volunteers used in providing relief in Haiti, that was another thing that was really beyond my comprehension. Seeing the kind of gratitude and respect that was shown to the local volunteers, the organization, the discipline, the way that our volunteers said thank you to the recipient as they received the goods, or even as they left the distribution place. Also, how the Tsuji volunteers gave the local volunteers an opportunity to experience the feeling of giving, and not just giving, not just throwing things out, but giving with respect, bowing your head, bowing to the recipients, helping them, in this case, helping them put the rice on top of their head the way that the Haitians carry things. Just this whole experience was really a turning point in my life. It awakened my compassion, and it opened up my my spirit to new ways of looking at things. So for example, if I give something to you, who is supposed to say thank you? Well, it's obviously you, right? You received something from me. But in Tzu Chi, we do it the other way around. It's the giver that says thank you to the recipient. This, I didn't quite get it. At first, I thought that maybe we were trying to teach them gratitude. When we say thank you to them, they will naturally say thank you back to us, and that way they will learn to be grateful for what they receive. But somehow that didn't quite connect. So it's only when one of the volunteers told me about how he had invited some doctors from Boston. He was from Boston. He had invited some doctors to come to Haiti to help out with the free clinic that we had in Haiti. And when they were done with their term in Haiti, after a week or so, one of the doctors came to him and said, "Thank you so much for inviting me here." And he said to the doctor, "You shouldn't thank me, you should thank them. It's these patients that made it possible for you to come here and have this experience." And that explanation, now I kind of got it. It's thanks to them that we get to experience this compassion in ourselves, and that we get to see this suffering and truly learn to appreciate our own blessings. That's why we say thank you to them. Toward the end of 2010, Grace was well enough recovered enough after her 4 surgeries for the salivary gland cancer. She was considered as cancer-free as you can be by the doctors, and Master Zheng gave her blessing for Grace to go back to the US. So we went back to the US. I started working at Fermilab and in Chicago. But I would come back to Southern California every few weeks to participate in training classes. Actually, the reason why I wanted to get trained as a Tzu-Cheng, as a doctor, was because Zheng gave her blessing. I didn't want to wear the gray uniform next time I went to Haiti. I wanted to wear the blue uniform with the white, and it didn't matter much to me whether I had this or not. So I only wanted to do the first year of training so that I could wear my blue uniform. That was the most important to me. So I went through training in the US and I was so in love with Haiti and so excited about Haiti that I actually tried to get a job at Tzu Chi USA. Unfortunately, in order to get a job in the US, you need to have a work permit. The work permit that I had was for physics work, which was my master. So it turned out that there was no way that I could get a visa, a work permit to work at Tzu Chi USA. So toward the end, around May of 2011, Grace and I decided that the only way for me to get my green card so that I could work at any place in the US was for us to get married. If we get married, then I could work for Tzu Chi. And of course, we anyway wanted to get married. We had got engaged already 1.5 years earlier, and we wanted to get married. But her parents did not want us to get married. At the time, I didn't understand why. But in the end, we decided to do it anyway. So we secretly got married. We went to San Diego courthouse and got married in the courthouse without any witnesses. Nobody knew. So after this, everything should have been just fine. I should have started to apply for my green card. Once that was done, maybe half a year later, I would be able to work for Tzu Chi. I would be able to go to Haiti, and everything would be all well, that would be our perfect love story. Unfortunately, that did not come to happen. About a month after we got married, Grace got a second cancer, leukemia. And this time it was much worse than the first one. Leukemia is basically, if you don't get treatment for acute leukemia, if you don't get treatment within a couple of weeks, you die. And the chances for survival are relatively slim. So Grace went into City of Hope and started chemo treatment. So this photo is, I believe, the first time I went to City of Hope. Grace's parents were already there. I was in Haiti when it happened, so I didn't arrive until a few days later. And then I had a cold, so I had to stay home and wasn't able to visit the hospital for a week. Then once I came to the hospital, then we had the next little challenge. So I would like to show the next video.
Case of emergency, who's the decision maker?
Me. I'm her husband. Of course, it's me. What's wrong?
Johan, we should talk over this, not your own decision.
I did nothing wrong. 我是她的老公，我本来就应该做决定。
OK， 你决定。明天我们离开，回台湾。
哎，爸比。
For those of you who don't understand Chinese, what he said there was, okay, if you're the one supposed to make the decision, then you make the decisions. We leave tomorrow. Of course, Grace was completely devastated, and she called a friend, a CG volunteer, who came in to negotiate between us, and he explained to me what was their cultural expectations, and he talked to them and managed to convince them to stay. So in the end, we worked together to take care of Grace, and everything turned out really well in terms of my relationship with my parents-in-law. But yeah, these cultural differences, these different expectations can be very difficult. So during Grace's first bout of cancer, she kept optimistic the entire time, despite all the hardship that she had to go through, including radiation treatment and surgeries. This time, what do you think her spirit was like? So I very clearly remember the first time I came to City of Hope to visit her after my cold was well. And she was lying in her hospital bed. She was eating, and she told me, last time when I had my cancer, I experienced surgery and radiation treatment, but I didn't have any chemo. I guess this is life's way of giving me the experience of chemo. So I would really understand what cancer patients go through. That just shocked me. I mean, who has that kind of consideration that, oh, I didn't learn enough. Now I got the opportunity to learn more, when they're lying in the bed with acute leukemia. Well, that is Grace. So when her hair started falling off, she resolutely decided to just shave it off, and she never wore a wig. That was just not the kind of things that she would care about. When after the first round of chemo, I think it was 3 weeks or so, she got a break, so she was able to go back home. And she was so happy that she got to play the piano again. So we play and sing together, just like we had done before. The only difference was really that she didn't have any hair. Later, we went to Taiwan again, to Hualien, because she wanted the doctors in Hualien to get the experience with her case, because it was such an unusual case. These two types of cancer have nothing to do with each other. There is no way that she could get leukemia as some kind of consequence of the first round of cancer or of the treatment. Very, very slim chance. So she wanted the doctors at City Hospital to get experience with this kind of case. And she also wanted to be close to her family, close to Master. So we went to Taiwan in order to get her bone marrow transplant. Throughout this entire process, she considered herself to be so lucky. And one of the things that made her feel very lucky was that both her brothers were a perfect match with her bone marrow. So basically, they could fight over who of them would get to give their bone marrow to Grace. It ended up being her, the older of her two brothers, that gave his bone marrow to her. So the photo that you see on the top right is Grace during the bone marrow transplant. So the bags that you see up there is the bone marrow that is coming down into her body. So this is just like a blood transfusion. The difference is that you have to first completely kill the patient's own immune system. So you have to eradicate their own bone marrow. And they do this through very, very heavy chemotherapy, extremely heavy chemotherapy. And it has to happen in a completely isolated area, completely clean. Grace insisted that I would be with her. She said that she would go crazy if she was in there alone. So I went in with her. And as you can tell, every time I went into her room, I would need to wear this complete protective clothing, including gloves, face mask, and hairnet, and this isolation gown. And so I was there with her when she got her bone marrow transplant. And now most people, when they go through this kind of chemo, it's very extremely huge suffering. People, they cannot eat, they just want to puke, or they just puke the entire time. Not Grace. This photo is taken just hours after her bone marrow transplant. The first thing she says when she wakes up is, I'm hungry, I would like to eat something. So we quickly scrambled to get something that she could eat, some IE, I think. And she had her first meal with a new bone marrow. After that, we lived in Hualien, in a house in Hualien for the next year or so, until the cancer came back in a mutated form. The doctors gave her light chemotherapy in order to try to control the spread of the cancer. And unfortunately, she got pneumonia. And with her immune system basically completely wiped out, her body was not able to fight it. But still, she managed to hang on in the ICU for a total of 4 months, from December through March, from December of 2012 to March of 2013. Throughout that entire time, she never woke up. Her eyes would be open. She would follow the cell phone, but she had no way of communicating, not even through blinking. The only way she could communicate with us was through her heart rate. So we could tell if she was upset or happy just from hearing the beeping of the heart rate monitor. This was probably this was by far, I should say, the most difficult time in my life. I was sitting by her bedside. I had the night shift. Her mom was there during the day. Her father and her brothers would come when they had a chance. But I was there almost every night, just sitting next to her, holding her hand, and reading Master's books. So I would read Wulian I Ching, the book on the Sutra of Infinite Meanings. And at the time, I had just finished, I actually went through my certification training in Hualien. So I just finished my certification training. The certification training was in Chinese, obviously. But fortunately, there was a brother who was helping me the entire time to translate Brother Bill Wei. I am so grateful to him. But as part of our certification training, we had reading assignments. And the first couple of books, they were in translation, so I could read the English translation. After that, there were no English translation, so I had no choice but to read the Chinese. And I kept reading, studied it out with maybe 3 hours per page, then it went down to 1 hour per page to half an hour per page. And finally, I was at a stage when I was done with my certification training. I started reading Wulian I Ching. This is just a spectacular book. I can so strongly recommend it. We're actually translating it right now, not this version, but the full version, the gray books. And it should come out around the end of this year or early next year. I can really recommend this book. It was a great support for me during this time, sitting there next to Grace. Throughout those 4 months, it happened once that I looked up at Grace and her eyes were right on me and her hand was moving under her blanket, and I helped lift the blanket and her hand grabbed mine. This was the only one time, I think, in February that I knew that she knew that I was there. And I'm so grateful for that moment. So she held on all the way through to March 30th. And on that day, I think she felt that she had given us enough time and maybe also herself enough time to prepare. So she gave us the time to call her family. We were all there, sitting around her, talking memories, chatting with her, just being there for her during her last night. And she passed away at 9 a.m. in the morning. So something interesting was that day was Guanyin Bodhisattva's birthday. So her mother likes to say that Grace was born into a new life on Guanyin Bodhisattva's birthday. And I really think that Guanyin Bodhisattva was watching over her, or had given her some of her spirit, because Grace was such a loving spirit and she was so talented. So maybe the time that she had was just, she had a very short time, but she used it to the fullest. Master says that we cannot control the length of our life, but we can control its breadth and its depth. And that's really something that Grace did. And I'm very grateful for that. So after Grace passed away, I was invited by 2 of the nuns, Ru Shifu and Yue Shifu, who came to our house. They asked me if I would like to, that I could actually come and stay at the abode. And I'm sure that Master was aware of the invitation as well. So I'm very grateful for that. I mean, the abode is such an amazing place. It's bustling with activity. It's the global headquarters of an international charity organization, but it's also a spiritual practice center. It has the calm and the dignity and the spirit and atmosphere of a spiritual practice center, of a monastery. And it was so helpful for me during those first months when it was so hard. I was staying at the dorm together with around 40 other people, right, sleeping on the wooden floor. I was fortunately on the second level, so sleeping on the wooden floor. In the beginning, we had the padding underneath, and we had the thick blanket on top. So I would put half of the thick blanket under me and half of it on top of me, so that way I got a little bit extra padding. Remember, I'm a Westerner. I'm used to sleeping in soft beds. So that was okay. But then somewhere around the middle of summer, maybe in June or July, when I came back up to my dorm, there was no padding anymore. There was just like the sheet, just the thin sheet like this, lying directly on the on the wood. And I asked what happened to the padding, and they said, "It's summer." I was like, "What do you mean it's summer? It's too hot for padding." And I was like, "Okay, it's too hot for padding, sure, but it's too hard for no padding." But that was just reality, so I had no choice but to learn to sleep directly on a wooden floor. And the first week was hard, the second week was hard, but around the third week I started to get used to it, and I was actually able to sleep again. The only part that I could not handle was my feet on the wooden floor, because when I moved my feet are kind of knuckly, so it would go over the bone, and I would wake up with a scream of pain. So I would put like a folded towel at my feet, so that would save my feet from that kind of pain. And after I did that, I was able to sleep. Every morning, I would wake up together with everyone else at around 3:45, 3:50, and go to the morning chanting. I would chant. I would have no idea what I was chanting, obviously, because my Chinese was nowhere near that level. But I would try to chant along, try to recognize a few characters on the screen, and just let the spirit of spiritual practice enter me. I would listen to Master, try to stay awake, even though I couldn't understand hardly a word. I would try to decipher some of Master's her notes that are on the PowerPoint. And gradually I would start to be able to connect the sounds that Master did with the characters. And I would start to understand a little bit of that Taiwanese. So I would maybe get to like 10% understanding, 20% understanding. So gradually over the years, it's already been 7 years. Now I would say, as long as Master talks about Buddhism, I understand probably 80, 90%. If she starts to go off into some kind of story, which is not in a subject area that I know, my understanding will quickly go down to 5 or 10%. But yeah, so it was definitely very helpful. Something else that happened at the abode was that I met Alex Grabiner. He was the staff at the Dharma's Water team in the US, the translation team. And he was translating books. So he introduced me to translation. I asked if I could help him out. So apart from pulling weeds in the fields or helping to pack food at the factory, I would also mainly work on translation. So I actually went through Dharma's Water Volume 3 during my time at the abode. And so every day I would read these stories about repentance, about what happened in the past, about our past lives. And that would kind of be permeated by the Dharma as I would go and listen to the morning teachings, as I would sleep on the wooden floor, as I would do translations all day. And this whole experience, I'm so grateful because it helped me so much in getting over my grief. I also started to read more of Master's sayings. One of the things that she says is that a smile and a frown are both facial expressions, so why not choose to smile? And this was something that I really tried very hard to practice. They say that it takes 14 days to form a habit. I tried so hard to smile, and the reason was that when you smile, your body thinks that you're happy. It thinks that you're not feeling as down or as sad as you are. And more importantly, when you smile at someone, a lot of times they will smile back. And when you get a smile from someone, then you really start to feel better. So I really believe that this practice helped me in going through that period of grief. Something else that helped me in going through that period of grief was totally Grace's example. The way that she showed gratitude to her illness for teaching her things. I was not at a point when I was able to feel gratitude for her illness or for her death, but I was able to focus on my gratitude to her for what she had taught me, for giving me those 5 years of her life, my gratitude to her family, to my family, to our friends, to the TG community, and to the abode. And that, I think, also really helped carry me through. So in 2014, I moved back to the US. I was asked to move back to be part of the spiritual training department. So I stayed with the Dharma's Water team. This is some team members and some other people. I really like this photo. It's from the teaching conference in 2015. So with the Dharma's Water department, what we do is our number one work is translation. So apart from the subtitles of Wisdom at Dawn, we also translate Master's books. So we've translated about 40 books so far, and we have more in the pipeline. There will be quite a few books coming out in the next couple of years. And when you translate, you have to read, and you have to read with understanding, because you have to really make sure that whatever is there in the English corresponds with the Chinese, and not just with the Chinese words, but with the Chinese meaning. So this is a really incredible kind of work to be able to do. But another thing that we do is spiritual training. So for many years, we have organized the spiritual retreat, English spiritual retreat in the US. And we always use a Dharma concept as the key of the retreat. So it can be gratitude, respect, and love. We've used the 4 infinite minds. We've used the 4 all-embracing virtues. We've used the 4 ingredient spiritual soup. We've used quite a few of these Dharma concepts as the key point for the entire curriculum. And in this way, we try to give more than just a fun experience, more than just a feeling of being touched, but also to really go deeper into the Dharma for the attendees. Recently, so for a number of years, actually, we have a monthly Dharma study group. The next one is coming up. It's always on the first Sunday of each month. So it's a little bit less convenient for you who are in Taiwan or Australia or Malaysia, because for you it's on Monday morning. And of course, for you who are in Africa or in Europe, it's in the middle of the night. But it's really amazing to hear the sharings from so many people and to get to see how everyone is implementing the Dharma in their everyday life. And during the pandemic, after the start of the pandemic, Master asked all CG volunteers around the world to pray. And being in charge of English spiritual training, we started an online prayer for Prayer for the World for CGUSA. So we have volunteers from all around the US who join. In the beginning, it was every day. Now we do two times a week, who join together to pray for the world, to give our dedications, and to share, and to pray for blessings for the world and for this pandemic to end. So that's where we're at. I'm just so grateful for being in this organization, having these opportunities, and for having the accompaniment of Master and her teachings, and for having this opportunity to walk the Bodhisattva path, not just this life, but life after life. And I would like to end my sharing with a song. This is a song that Grace and I recorded together at the time when she was getting treatment for her salivary gland cancer. And this song is about bone marrow transplantation. It's about the amazing causes and conditions that allow two people, possibly from different parts of the world, to meet in the sixth pair, which is the sixth chromosome pair that have to be equal between the donor and the recipient in order for a bone marrow transplant to be possible. So I would like to share this song with you. And thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
All those troubles I don't mind. What we set in motion suits me fine. Let love guide us again this time. You're from far away, I come from Neverland. Can't find a word to say, no need to lift a hand. Searching everywhere, our memory was waiting there. From bits and pieces comes the hope of our lives. You're from far away, I come from Neverland. Can't find a word to say, no need to lift a hand. Searching everywhere, our memory was waiting there. From bits and pieces